Translation theory. Are there different ways to translate? Which one is best? So there's going to be different theories. Which one is best? Why do we buy into which approach? Do translators ever make mistakes? Let's just first put it up front. Do translators ever make mistakes? Here, who's used this King James Version here? Is there a King James person? Okay, here's a mistake in your King James Version. Now you say, Hildebrandt, you're coming off really strong. This is a mistake. Okay, it's wrong. Okay. Now, by the way, do I have a great deal of respect for the King James Version? Yes. Okay. But question, is it perfect? And the answer is no. Here's an example. In Proverbs chapter 26, verse 23, it says in the King James Version, KJV, King James Version, burning lips and a wicked heart are like a potsherd. Do you know what a potsherd is? In Israel, they make these pots out of clay pots. And what happens to clay pots after a period of time? Clay pots always get what? Busted. And so you've got these sherds of pots that are busted. So potsherd is a busted pot piece. So with burning lips and a wicked heart are like a potsherd, a piece of pottery, covered with silver dross. Silver dross. What is silver dross? We don't do that. When you want to purify a metal, what do you do with it? Gold or silver, what do? Do you put it in a fire and then kind of bubble it and melt it down, and then all the crud rises to the top? And then what do you do with the stuff that's on the top? You skim off all the crud that's on the top and you take it off, and does that purify your metal? Is it possible you have to do the process many times and keep scraping the bad stuff off and things? So silver dross. Why would you put silver dross? Is silver dross the bad stuff? It's the bad stuff that you skim off the silver, you put that on a pot. Does that sound just a little bit odd that you'd put silver dross on a pot? It sounds a little bit odd. The King James translators, first of all, when did they translate? 1611. Did the King James translators, were they all experts in Hebrew? Yes, many of the translators were experts in Hebrew. Question, did they know everything about Hebrew? No. The King James translators tell us in the introduction, they tell us explicitly, they said, we didn't know Hebrew, some of the Hebrew words. This word silver dross is only used one time in the Bible. What's the problem with that? Meaning is determined by what? What determines meaning? I've said it about 50 times at least. What determines the meaning of a word? Context. What's the problem when the word is only used one time? What's the problem with that? Do you have trouble establishing the context? This word is only used one time. So the King James translators, they went to some Jewish people and they said, what does this word mean? And some of the Jewish people said, well, it means this. They went to other Jewish people. What does it mean? They told them something totally different. And they ended up with all these different meanings. And basically the Jewish people, what was their answer for what this word meant? They didn't know either, okay? That's the honest truth. And the King James translators point that out. We did the best we could. We looked in our best dictionaries. We checked with our best people. Nobody knew really what some of these words were. These Hebrew words are rare words. And you say, Hildebrandt, how do you know that's wrong? Well, once upon a time, just north of Israel, if this is Israel, just north of Israel, 50, 60, 70 miles, there's a place called Ugarit. It's up in Lebanon, Ugarit. They found this place called Ugarit. There's a language called Ugaritic, okay? I've had the unfortunate privilege of having to learn Ugaritic, okay? They found like 20,000 of these tablets, okay? These tablets from Ugaritic. They date from about 1200 BC. Ugaritic is a sister language to Hebrew. Is that very helpful? Guess what word pops up in the Ugaritic text? This very word, this silver dross word, which we don't know from Hebrew, occurs in Ugaritic. And what it means is, and I'm not sure whether I've got the, do I have the translation down here? No, I don't. What it means is, what do you put on a pot? Normally on a pot, you put a glaze on it, right? A glaze. The word that we found from Ugaritic that's used here means that the potsherd has a glazing on it. It's a glaze, it's glaze, that's all it is a glaze, okay? Now, by the way, does that make sense in this context, that it's glaze? Yeah, that's what you put on pots. And what he's saying is, you got fervent words with an evil heart. It's like glaze on a mud pot. You see that? The glaze is all pretty, but it's on a mud pot. Fervent words with an evil heart is like glaze, pretty nice glaze on a mud pot. So that's this word we now know. We now know what this is. You say, well, the King James translates, they should have known better. Why couldn't they have known better? Because Ugarit was only found in 1948, and it was frankly into the 50s and 60s before anybody could even translate this stuff very well. So what I'm suggesting is the King James translator, there is no way they could know what that word meant. We've only found that in the last 50 years. Does that make sense? So were the King James translators evil? No, they did the best they could with 1611. That things were very different back then, and we know, to be honest with you, we know much better now. So that's one reason for a movement away from the King James, is we know better now what some of these words mean, because we have some of these cognate languages that help us to understand what it is, okay? So now here's another one. Has the English language changed? In the last 300 years, has the English language changed? And here's 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 1 says this, we do you to wit of the grace of God. Now I ask you, have you done anybody to wit lately? Said, man, I got done to wit, but have you done anybody to wit? Okay. Do we talk like this? I do you to wit. When was the last time you said, I do you to wit? Okay. Now, and then the next question you say is, what in the world is this talking about? I do you to wit. What in the world does that mean? How about if I translate it like this? I want you to think about the grace of God. I want you to think about the grace of God. Does that make good sense? I want you to think. Do you to wit means I want you to think. Your wit. Do you know what wit? Okay, wit. Is anybody witty in here? Okay. Somebody's shaking their head. Okay, I like witty people. You can give me grief with it and stuff because I enjoy arguing with it and stuff, but witty. I do you to wit. In other words, I want you to think about the grace of God. I want you to think about the grace of God. I do you to wit. Now, by the way, should we probably translate this differently today than it was translated 300 years ago? Because we don't do many people to wit anymore. Here's three different theories, actually four theories of translation. And here's the first translation. You've got word in this language, and you've got a word in this language. So you take the word in this language, and you translate it for the word in this language. A word-for-word literal translation. One word in this language, one word in this language. One word here, and that's how you translate. Now I want you to think about that. Do any languages match up word for word? This word always means this in this language. Okay? So can you take one word in one language and always translate in another language that way? Does it work? Do languages line up like that, one for one? No, they don't line up that way. So is this word for word literal? Is that a flawed theory? Because languages don't work like that. Now, by the way, do you like word for word literal, though? Because this is a pretty nice to kind of, if you can get them one for one, is that really interesting? You know, do you want to do that? So I guess what I'm saying is, yeah, go for word as much as you can, but is that going to break down eventually? In a song, now what's the problem with song? Is song more poetic? Is poetry in that thing going to be much more difficult than just running narrative? Because when you got poetry, the poetry stuff just doesn't come along. And believe me, I've tried on this. I don't want to tell you how many hours. I have spent literally hundreds of hours trying to translate Hebrew poetry into English. And it's beautiful in Hebrew. It comes over into English. I can't turn it into poetry in English. And it's really disappointing to me. And I've spent at least 10 hours on one verse trying to do it, and I couldn't get it right. And that really has been annoying to me. So this poetry had a whole other dimension to this between the language thing. So word for word literal, do we like this? Is this a good method if you can get away with it? This is good if you can do it, but it doesn't always work like that. So then they have what's called a modified literal. And a modified literal is take it as literally as you can, word for word, but at some points that will break down. At some points, and that was just what she was saying, at some points it will break down. So you do it, modified literal means go word for word, but then when it doesn't work, you got to bail. Now, here is a whole different theory. It's called dynamic equivalence. Now, what dynamic equivalence does is it does not translate word for word. What dynamic equivalence does is it translates what? Meaning for meaning. Is that very different than word for word? So, for example, I think of the word chesed in Hebrew. Chesed, okay? Chesed. What does chesed mean? And you say, Hildebrandt, what does it mean? You've translated it how many different ways in your life? When I was younger, I translated chesed means love. Okay, so I translated love. You say, oh, that's nice. Okay, love. But then after you do that for a while, you realize that's not really what chesed means. Chesed means more like, and you say, why don't we just use like the NIV? The NIV translates it steadfast love. Now, is that steadfast love, is that a little different than love? Steadfast love. And then you say, I don't like the word steadfast. It sounds like I don't know. So then I translated the word loyal love. If you look in the NASB, I did loyal love there. Now, by the way, is loyal love different than steadfast love? Is there a little bit of similarity between steadfast love and loyal love? Does loyal love have the idea of maybe a covenant or contract that you're loyal to someone? And so I like loyal love better. But then you said, well, yeah, but remember you were back at Grace, and back then you used to translate it stubborn love. Now, is stubborn love different, but does it, you see what I'm saying? Does it have something of that loyal, steadfast? I like the word stubborn love and things, and I did that for a while. But then what was the problem? Then I started realizing for most people, is stubborn a positive or negative? Negative. And so I thought, okay, I know what I mean by stubborn love, but it doesn't work. It's negative for most people, so I dropped the stubborn, and that's when I went to loyal love. Okay, do you see what I'm saying? So what does chesed mean? And the answer is, I don't know. Love, covenant love, loyal love, steadfast love, stubborn love. You know what I'm saying? Does it have all these ideas? And so the word is it's a multiplexed word. And when I go to translate it into English, it's more complicated than I can get it into one or two English words. And again, so that's okay. Dynamic equivalence is you try to do meaning for meaning. You try to take the meaning of this and try to do the meaning over there. And then lastly is what they call politically corrected views. Now, what's a politically corrected view? The TNIV, by the way, Today's New International, they published that, I think it was in England. And generally what gets politically corrected things, is gender one of the big things that they'll try to politically correct for gender? I was in a meeting when they introduced the NRSV, New Revised Standard Version. And Bruce Metzger was up there. He's an old godly gentleman from Princeton. He's probably in his 90s now. Anyways, it's been a long time since I've seen him. I hope he's all right. But anyways, Metzger was introducing the NRSV. And one of the women translators got up and she was railing on the NRSV because the NRSV, we've come a long way, but in the NRSV, they still translate God as He. And she was just so disgusted that a Bible would translate God as He. Because that's gender what? Exclusive. It excludes women and stuff. So it's terrible they call God He, And she was going off and off on all this stuff. Metzger was sitting up there. I forget it. He's got his elbows on the table. This woman's going off on the she God. And Metzger's got his head like this. And he's just sitting there going like this. You got 1,000 scholars out there. Metzger's going like this. Anyways, but did she have an act? Okay, that was her axe to grind. And so, have you guys ever seen a vegan reading of the book of Job? I'm not kidding you. I'm dead serious. This is a vegan reading for the book of Job. And anyways, it's just, so I'm saying is, do different people have different political agendas today? Do different people have political agendas? Can they read their political agendas into how they translate? Yeah. Now, question, do you like that or not like that? Well, I don't like it because I'm an old man, I guess. But you guys probably don't notice the difference and stuff because I should say you guys have been steeped in this stuff since the time you went to kindergarten, believe it or not. So what I'm saying is be careful about the politically correct stuff. That bothers me. When somebody's got an agenda that they're trying to read into Scripture, I have a problem with that. I don't try to read agendas into Scripture. I try to do what? I try to listen to Scriptures. Yes? No. It's Elohim is a masculine ending, okay? It's a he, okay? So, now I don't want to get into the philosophical discussion, with God and all this stuff. That's another time. But what I'm trying to say is when you're doing a translation, you have to work with what the original writers meant and what they translated. So we've got to work with that. So, all right, let's take an example, and let's look at Proverbs chapter 10, verse 5. And what I want to do is just walk through different translations and kind of play around with this and have fun. Now, try this one. This is an English translation done by the King James translation. Done in 1611, updated in the 1880s, and then now you got a new King James that was done a few years ago. But the King James Version, by the way, was updated in the 1880s. And the ones that your parents read that they call their King James Version is not really the 1611 version. It's the 1880s version. But anyways, this is King James, 1611. He that gathereth in the summer is a wise son. Do any of you gathereth? Now, question, as soon as you see this, is this an archaic form? Now, by the way, do you understand that? Yeah, you understand it. It's got an ETH on the end. You don't usually see this and stuff. We're used to more ET than ETH. But anyways, but he that sleepeth. Do any of thou sleepeth? In my class? Better not, okay? So no sleepeth thou, okay? But he that sleepeth, we don't say sleepeth, we say what? Sleeps, okay? We just put an S on it, okay? He that sleepeth in the harvest is a son that causeth shame, okay? So we've got, okay, is it clear is that how you translate that stuff? Or you wouldn't do that, right? Can you understand it? Yeah, so you can understand it. The King James, is there a certain beauty to it? There's a certain beauty to it. To be honest with you, I love the King James Version, but the language is somewhat archaic now, and so you got to take that into effect. Okay, King James was one of the best and most incredible translations ever done. And that's why it lasted for 300-400 years. And that's why people still use it today, because it was so incredible. Now I'll show you some other ones that, okay, so this is the King James Version. And let's go oneth. Here's the NASB. The New American Standard was an attempt to go word for word. The NASB, the New American Standard Version, was an attempt to go more word for word literal. They tried to go word in Hebrew, word in English, word in Hebrew, and they tried to do it. This is the way that comes out here. He who gathers in the summer. Now, by the way, do we like the gathers better than gathereth? Yeah, okay, so that's better. That's an improvement. He who gathers in the summer is a son who acts wisely. Now, by the way, is this son who acts wisely, is that pretty long? Okay, so but he who sleeps, this is an improvement. So he who sleeps in harvest is a son who acts shamefully. Is this obviously clear what this means? First of all, yes, we understand it. It makes perfectly clear. So this is good. Have they made some improvements here with the gathers, the sleeps, and have they made some improvements? Have they lengthened the son who acts shamefully, though? Have they kind of drawn that out? Now, I want to put the NIV up there and just so you can see the difference between the NIV. The NIV says, he who gathers crops. Now, by the way, where'd the crops come from? Those NIV translators, do you realize those NIV translators, they added that word crops in there. The word crops is not in the Hebrew. They added to Scripture. Is that bad news, man? They added to Scripture. Do you see that? They added to Scripture. Now, who did the NIV? You say, Hildebrandt, didn't you tell me that Dr. Wilson did? He worked in Isaiah, not Proverbs. And by the way, I've told you about Dr. Wilson, right? You have, thus saith the Lord. That's like good, gold. Okay, the Wilson standard's right there. Okay, Dr. Wilson says it's good to go. I mean, you know what I'm saying. But anyways, now, why did they put the word crops in there? No, seriously, they added the word crops. He who gathers crops, why did they put that word crops in there? Pardon? Yeah, who said that? That was really good. Yeah. In English, when we gather, he who gathers, we ask, gathers what? What was our next question? He who gathers, in the summer, we'd say gathers what, right? Are you going to gather marbles? Are you going to gather sand? What are you going to gather and stuff? When it says crops, is that what it originally meant? Is that what the word katsir means, to gather crops? But actually, in an agricultural society, you just say gathers and you parallel with harvest. Is it obvious that what it means? But in our day, is gathers obvious? No. So they make it explicit by saying gathers crops. Is that helpful? Is that helpful to us? Because we don't live in an agrarian society, and so the crops is helpful. Okay? Now, by the way, is that what it originally meant? That's what it originally meant. Is the word crops there in Hebrew? No, it's not. But it's embedded in the word he who gathers. Of course, you gather crops. Okay? So, did you see what's going on there a little bit? He who gathers crops in summer is a wise son. He who sleeps during harvest is a disgraceful son. Do you see this wise son? Is wise son different than a son who acts wisely? Is this really long and drawn out? Now I ask you, in a proverb, should a proverb be long and drawn out, or should a proverb be pithy and punchy? A stitch in time saves nine. Should a proverb be pithy and punchy? Or should a proverb be this long sentence? Is a proverb supposed to be short, pithy, and bam, to the point? Is this a son who acts wisely? Is that drawn out, or is that, or is a wise son, is that kind of like short and to the point? So question, does this fit Proverbs, the idea of the proverbial genre, does this, or the literary form, does this fit it more punchy? A disgraceful son rather than a son who acts shamefully. You see what I'm saying? So question, do I like this translation better than this one? I personally like it. This one has some punch to it. Short, like Proverbs, adds the crops here to help you, just in the frame of the agrarian stuff. And then disgraceful son, again, punching, opposing the wise son, and the disgraceful son sleeps during harvest. By the way, is this talking about college? Yes. Okay, now, let's go to a different one. This is called the New Living Translation. And in the book of Proverbs, in the New Living Translation, there's all sorts of problems. So, let's look at some of them. A wise youth, now as soon as you see that, has something changed. A wise youth. All the other ones said a wise what? Son. Does everybody see that? Had they neutered the gender and put youth instead of son so that it would not be exclusively gender son? Was it done for that reason? And the answer is yes, it was done for exactly that reason. Did somebody write pages telling them that that was not the right way to do it? Yes. Was that individual's suggestions ignored? Yes. When you lose, what do? You complain, and that's what I'm doing. So anyways, no, really, it really still bothers me. Listen, my son, to your father's instruction. Doesn't that sound? Listen, my son, to your father's instruction. Does that sound very different than listen, my child, to your father's instruction? Yeah. How old is the son? This guy's trying to get his son not to, how do you guys use shack up, hook up with this woman? And a question, is he a child? No, I don't know what you got, whatever you call it. But anyways, you know what I'm saying? Is this a father warning his son, telling him not to have whatever? Is this kid a child? No, obviously, he's okay. And so what I'm saying is to use the word child, why did they use the word child instead of son? Listen, my son, to your father's instruction. Listen to my child. Do you see the difference in meaning there? I think anybody can see the difference there. Anyways, question. When the editor over you does something, you got to bite your tongue and just say, hey, that's it. You know what I'm saying? You got to chill out sometimes, okay? I'm still mad about it. I think it's wrong. But anyways, and you know what I'm saying? And so, but do I have respect for the people that I translated with? And the editor over me, I won't even tell you his name, but anyways, do I respect the guy? Yes, immensely, and I enjoy the person. And he does me to wit and gets me to think, and I just appreciate him so much, but I just disagreed on these points, okay? So a youth who sleeps away the hour of opportunity. Well, wait, let's finish this. A wise youth works hard all summer. Where's the harvest crops? Is the harvest crops gone? The harvest crops is gone. Why did they take it away from the harvest crops? It says works hard. Is that the real point of the proverb? Is the proverb that you guys need to gather crops, or is the proverb that you guys need to work hard? Is this telling you the meaning? Is this telling you the meaning without the image of the harvesting of crops? Yes. Is that good or bad? What happened to the metaphor of the crops and stuff? Is that beautiful, the metaphor of the harvesting crops? Yes, it is. Okay, I like that. I don't like it when they take my metaphors away. The metaphors are rich. Metaphors are rich. But here, question, does this help you understand the point of the proverb? The answer is yeah. This puts it right out in your face. And I I like subtleties and I like the richness of the metaphors. And so this bothers me a little bit too, but I can see the point. You don't put the metaphors in, you put the meaning of the metaphor. And by the way, is that more helpful for people that read the Bible? Are they sure to get the right point then? And so what happens is you work with the point. Now, a youth who sleeps away the hour of opportunity. What's the hour of opportunity? Was that it? That you need to harvest when the fruit is ripe. If you harvest 2 months after the fruit is ripe, it's no good. So is this again giving us the point of the proverb without using the harvest imagery? So this is telling us the meaning, and so it's more meaning to meaning. Yes, ma'am?
Actually, I think that once you take away the metaphor with the crops, it raises some interesting questions. Like why is he working hard in the summer? What's wrong with the winter?
Okay, yeah.
It doesn't mention the crops. It's like...
Right, so why is he working hard all summer and things? That raises a whole nother environment. But by the way, do most college students, do you work what, in the summer or in the winter? Well, no, you work in the summer, right? You guys do summer jobs now? Yeah, I assume that you work in summer. So that's maybe why it still fits that people work still in the summer and stuff. But notice, brings shame, again, not the sun and stuff. Is the meaning of the proverb really clear in this one? Is the meaning of the proverb really clear in this one without the metaphor and stuff? Yeah. Now, this one. Once upon a time, there was a guy named Eugene Peterson, teaches up in Canada. You know how the Canadians are. So he is a, how should I say it? He is a godly man that I would look up to. I don't know him personally. I look up to him from the work that he's done, and I've read some of his work. He's a godly man and stuff. Is he extremely creative? Now, what's the problem with creativity? I'll tell you, because I tend to be creative myself at points and stuff. It's hard when you're creative. There's a fine line between creativity. Now, I'm not talking about him. Eugene Peterson, I'm talking about, okay, there's a fine line between creativity and weirdness, okay? And I've never been able to find the line, okay? But anyways, he, on the other hand, is a good scholar, top-flight scholar, and a creative individual, and he comes up with stuff that when you read it, you say, I read it, and I say, man, I wish I would have translated like that. This guy is a genius, okay? And he captured, now what I'm saying is, Eugene Peterson from, he's up at Regent in Vancouver in Canada, he captures something of the prophetic, the proverbial moment that I have not been able to capture, and so I look with admiration. Now, it's going to be different. It's going to be different. But this guy captures, check this out. This is his translation. Same verse. Make hay while the sun shines. No, is that it? Has he got it? Do we say make hay while the sun shines? He's got that, work hard during the summer. He's got it. Make hay while the sun shines, that's smart. Going fishing during the harvest, that's stupid. Now if I had to change a word, it would probably be this one. Stupid, is that real strong? Yeah. By the way, is the proverb real strong? Yeah, but anyways, so he actually, I think I toned this word down just a shade, but is there genius here? Does this capture the proverb? Do you see this? Make hay while the sun shines, that's smart. Go fishing during the harvest, that's stupid. Okay?
Is that the Message?
This is the Message Bible. It's called The Message. It's done by Eugene Peterson. Now, I've got to admit, while I respect Peterson, he's genius and stuff, the problem with one person translating is it possible that you'll have verse that's flat, genius, flat, genius? You know what I'm saying? Can a person be genius every verse? Does he do this with every verse? No, I picked this out, okay? But what I'm saying is he will have these verses that you just sit there and it just makes you smile. You say, man, he's got it. I mean, now, by the way, is this word for word? No, it's this dynamic equivalence, meaning for meaning. Has he got the meaning for meaning thing? Now, by the way, which one of these translations are you going to use? Is it possible when I'm wanting to smile that I'll use the Message and it'll make me think about this thing in a different way and I never thought about it before, and so I use this? Is it possible to use the NIT or NLT? Yeah. Is it possible to use the NIV? Is it possible you can use different translations at when you're in different moods, when you're doing different things? If you're a pastor trying to prepare for a sermon, are you going to use something wild and wacky like that, or are you going to use a more word-for-word literal? Actually, if you're a pastor doing a thing, would you probably do both? Yeah. Get this one. Would the people in your church find resonance with this last one? Yeah, so, it depends what you're trying to do. And and of course, what you really should do is, of course, read the original Hebrew, and then it's all,